Hello and welcome to the Indian Ocean. I'm Toby Goode of the Associated Press and I'm reporting live for CGTN's Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Weibo platforms and the CGTN app. Well, I'm here on an 80-meter vessel called the Ocean Zephyr, which is currently sailing in the waters off the Seychelles. Now, the vessel, as you can see, has been packed with an awful lot of scientific equipment. That's because we're taking part here in a unique expedition, and the aim of which is to explore the depths of the ocean around the Seychelles that have never previously been charted. Now, the mission here is being organised by the British-led Nekton team. It's a science registered charity, and the team on board is an international team of scientists, and their research work is varied and involves a lot of different technical equipment, but most interestingly perhaps is a submersible. Now, prior to this expedition, no one had been further than 30 meters below the surface of the waters in the Seychelles here, but not now, because scientists here are diving to depths of up to 300 meters in submersibles. Now, in a moment, we'll be able to speak to one such scientist who right now is some 110 meters below the surface of the water. But before that, let's take a look at the very careful and delicate operation involved with taking a submersible from the deck of the ship into the water. For the crew and scientists on board the Ocean Zephyr, safety is the #1 priority. Prior to each dive, the submersibles undergo rigorous checks on each piece of equipment. Even the passengers are carefully weighed before boarding. The pilot and the scientist board the sub once it's in the water, watching over the delicate launch procedure. The 5.5-ton subs are fragile and crucial pieces of equipment, so immense precautions are taken when putting them into the water. High waves, strong currents, and heavy tropical rain can all put the mission into jeopardy. The subs can carry water sampling devices, multiple sets of cameras to record the underwater world, and a special robotic arm that enables it to collect samples from the deep. Once inside the submersible, the crew conduct yet another set of tests before they are unhooked from the boat and are free to dive. At the turn of a knob, the air keeping the sub afloat is pushed out of the ballast tanks, and the craft begins its descent into the deep, providing researchers with an unparalleled view of the world hidden beneath the waves. Flying along underwater cliffs or over the seabed, each dive gives them an insight into the conditions of the habitat for fish and corals living in the Indian Ocean. It's this understanding, based on scientific data, that should help them inform decision makers on the need to better protect the oceans and the ecosystems they support. Well, you can see behind us now the ocean, the waters of the Seychelles, and the San Josef Atoll. And as mentioned, below us now in the deep is Dr. Lucy Woodall, and she is taking part in a scientific survey under the waves right now. Dr. Woodall, can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Hello. Well, please tell us, what's it like being down in the submersible?
Well, it's an absolute privilege to be down here. We get to see the whole amazing vista. Just this morning, having a look down here at the rocks, and I'm just going to show you, we can see 8, 9, 10 different species of coral just at first glance. So there you are, you can see out there now. You can see the white whip coral coming up. You can see some of the coral with the blue and the green polyps out there now. And even a little fish underneath the crag, if you guys can see that as well, just coming into view. Really amazing.
Well, you can clearly see some absolutely fascinating examples of marine life down there, Dr. Woodall. What are some of the key findings to date?
Yes, it's been very important for us to visit multiple different islands because each one of is special and really unique. And that's, I think, my first impression is that how they differ on the shape underneath, the waters, the life that is on the seabed, and also the fish that's around them. We've seen in each of our locations that as we go from shallow to deep, then the life changes. We would expect this, but it's really interesting to see these changes, and that's going to be one of the things we're going to be analysing. We've seen lots of predators, lots of sharks, especially in areas that have been protected. So the UNESCO World Heritage Site at the island of Aldabra gave us the most spectacular vision of predators.
Now, from the marine biologist perspective, Dr. Woodall, what are the expectations overall for your expedition?
So it's an absolute privilege to be down here, so we have to make sure that we document everything really carefully. So on each of our submersibles we have cameras pointing forward, to pointing down, to pointing out to the side, to really capture the whole experience. In the next few months, the team in the lab in Oxford will be analysing those data and putting them together with the environmental data that we've collected. Things like the temperature of the water, the salinity, the oxygen, and all these things, when we pull them together, we can understand not just what we see in the areas that we visited, but what we might expect in some of the other regions in Seychelles. This will help our Seychelles partners to be able to appropriately manage and be able to help with the marine spatial planning that is going on right now, so they can protect 30% of their waters, which is already a more amazing commitment.
And Dr. Woodall, has there been any evidence so far of the effects of climate change or environmental damage to some of the habitats that your team has been exploring?
Well, that was one of our big questions when we came out here. It's a very hot year here in the Indian Ocean. There's a lot of predictions for there being bleaching events. So far, we haven't seen that either in the shallow waters or down at depth. I know that there has been some evidence on the Mahe Plateau, but we've been working on the outer islands and we haven't seen that. And that's especially important. We have information to show us about our currents and our tides and our wonderful sub-pilots who I'm with Randy here right now. He'll tell you how difficult it is with all of the currents that we have to try and work in. But it's these currents that are protecting our outer islands here. So this is really interesting and important information for us to document.
Well, there's clearly a lot of analysis to be done from your findings down there, Dr. Woodall. We'll leave you to carry on with your very important research, but thank you very much for speaking to us today from deep beneath the ocean.
My absolute pleasure, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we've seen a glimpse there with Dr. Woodall of what can be seen from the submersible right now. But let's take a look at some of the other highlights that the scientists have seen over the course of this expedition so far.
Descending into the deep in submersibles, an unseen world rich in life greets scientists on every dive. The large fish that inhabit these waters seem as curious of us as we are to them. This sunfish came up close and personal, to the delight of a marine expert whose dream it was to see one in the wild. Exploring far beneath the maximum depth for scuba divers, nobody knew what to expect. Groupers and even large hammerhead sharks approached the small craft, almost greeting us to their world. And this ray, seemingly escaping the bright lights of the submersible. Sightings of large predatory fish were a delight, but as interesting was the study of their habitats. The underwater cliffs providing a home to numerous species of soft and hard corals and sponges, which in turn were a refuge to a multitude of small fish of every shape and every colour. Overfishing had long been a key threat to these ecosystems. Now, man-made pollution, global warming and the acidification of the oceans are new challenges facing creatures that live beneath the waves. These coral are facing growing threats from climate change. As the oceans slowly soak up heat from the atmosphere, marine species will be affected in different ways. Some will adapt, some will migrate to cooler waters, and others will disappear, leaving a gap in ecosystems that have existed for millennia.
Well, some extraordinary images there of some of the marine life that has been spotted so far by the scientists on this mission. Well, I've come down here to the lower deck of the Ocean Zephyr ship, where you can see behind me another of the submersibles which has been diving deep down into the waters. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about the submersible with one of the pilots here. So I'm joined by Robert Carmichael. Hello, Robert.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. But how are you? I think it's quite a responsibility to be operating such a complex and no doubt expensive piece of equipment.
It is indeed. It's a real pleasure. It's a terrific piece of observation technology. The sphere is optically matched to seawater, and the observer that sits next to me in the sub can really understand the entire environment around them and how all the parts and pieces of the ocean fit together.
Now, it's presumably quite complex to pilot one of these craft. What's involved and how much experience have you had with diving?
I've been diving for almost 40 years now, and about 6 years ago I started piloting submersibles and have accumulated several hundred dives now. And it's much like an aircraft. After you reach that 100 or 200 hours or 200 dives, you start to really get to where you feel comfortable on your own and you're truly ready to lead a dive.
Now, you're part of a very exciting scientific expedition here. What are some of the highlights for you of taking part in this team project?
Well, the Nekton mission is such an incredible team effort, from science and technology coming together with incredible operators of ships and other equipment, the ROV team. It's just an amazing group of people that have all come together to document the underwater environment in a way that's never been done before. So very proud, very excited to be part of this mission, and we've pulled off a lot of documentation.
And just finally, what's it like to be down there in one of those? What does it feel like?
About everybody that gets in the sub with me for the first time says you have the most amazing job in the world and I have to acknowledge that. It's one of the most incredible things you could possibly do, being in that submersible. You feel like you're inside the fishbowl. You don't even know where the sphere ends and begins. It's incredible.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us there, Robert. Thank you. And so, exciting to go down in a submersible, exciting research as well. And one of the marine species which is being looked at in the waters of the Seychelles is the sea turtle. And I'm now happy to be joined by Dr. Jean Mortimer. Hello, Jean. Jean, you've been working for almost 40 years, I understand, in the Seychelles, specifically looking at sea turtles and their habitat. I'm keen to know, what's the importance of studying sea turtles in such detail?
Well, sea turtles are important for several reasons. One is that people like them, and they either like them just because they like the turtle, or they like them because they want to exploit them in some way. So everybody seems to be interested in them. Now, sea turtles are what we call a flagship species, and that means that you can use sea turtles to get people's attention to also protect habitats, because sea turtles use a huge variety of habitats. They use the beach, they use the coral reefs, they use the seagrass beds, they even dive deep down in the water. They're found in the oceanic gyres. And so in order to protect sea turtles and conserve them, you have to preserve their habitats. So they serve a purpose by being an ambassador to people.
I see, thank you. And so the connection here with this scientific mission, how does the research here help the conservation efforts on the Seychelles with regards to the sea turtle?
Well, as you may know, the Seychelles government wants to set aside 30% of its marine habitat for protection, and we need to make sure we're setting aside the right 30%. And so, during this expedition, we're getting to learn a lot more about the more remote parts of the ocean, so that we can better understand it and better manage it.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Dr. Mortimer. Well, let's now take a look at some of the images that have been captured of these beautiful creatures, sea turtles, here in the remote Seychelles.
A sea turtle swims gracefully through the balmy waters of the Indian Ocean. Hawksbill turtles, like this one, are the most tropical of all turtles, and the Seychelles are home to one of the largest populations in the world. They love feeding on tropical seagrass in coral reef habitats, usually foraging in shallow waters. But some individuals are comfortable diving up to 60 meters below the surface, according to scientists. These majestic creatures are primarily solitary, but do interact with each other, mating at sea or close to their nesting sites on beaches. Conservationists warn that hawksbills and their larger green turtle cousins are endangered species. But thanks to legislation by the Seychelles government in the 1990s, turtles now enjoy protected status here, and their numbers have since been rising. The greatest challenge now, scientists say, is the environmental and human threat to their feeding and nesting habitats. Scientists on the Nekton mission are taking a close look at the health of the coral habitats they find in their dives. Samples brought up from the deep ocean during this expedition are being carefully analysed in the onboard laboratory.
I'm looking at this brittle star under the microscope.
Once the data has been processed, it's hoped that findings will help the Seychelles develop its strategy for managing turtle habitats.
So the importance of conservation efforts is clear, and the mission here, the Nekton mission, is working together with the government of the Seychelles. The data that is being gathered here from this expedition will help inform the Seychelles about their plans to protect large areas of their oceans. 30%, in fact, they wish to put under protection by 2020. Now, there's a lot of work still to be done on this mission. The crew and scientists here, almost 50 people on board, they've been at sea now for some 6 weeks, and there's just one more week to go here in the remote waters of the Seychelles. But really that's only the start of the work, because afterwards scientists need to process the immense amount of data that has been gathered. Hundreds of samples taken from the deep, and thousands of pieces of data gathered from other technological research activities. And this will go on for months and years. And in fact, Nekton plans to launch 5 other expeditions in different parts of the Indian Ocean. And together, the data gathered, they hope, will help inform world leaders about what the world must do with regard to protecting our oceans. Well, that's all from us here on the Ocean Zephyr, out in the remote waters of the Seychelles. I'm Toby Goode of the Associated Press, and I've been reporting live for CGTN's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter and Weibo platforms, and for the CGTN app. And so, it's goodbye from the Indian Ocean.